Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. You know today's guest from his channel, Gaming With Edo. You know him as the founder of Pencil First Games, and you know him from hit games like Skulk, Herbaceous, and numerous other releases. Welcome to the show, Ed Baraf.
Hello.
How are you doing today, man? You got a lot of projects on the horizon. You got a lot of fingers in many, many different pies. You are producing videos like a madman. I feel like I'm talking to the man, the myth, the legend himself, who's on the face of every single Kickstarter project, whether you're involved in that project or not.
Thank you for saying so. I don't know if I sort of feel like my videos aren't as in favor anymore, but I do make a lot of content, a lot of products, and have a family and a job. So I'm a busy guy, but it's because it's what I enjoy. So this is my having fun stuff.
Well, I know your history involves video game development, and then you are, of course, a game designer, a game publisher, and a content creator. I kind of resent the term content creator to some degree, but I've settled with it. It's the modern lingo. You're a reviewer, a critic, but how do you really view yourself as your primary role within board games?
It's a good question. I mean, ultimately, I think, and I've had to settle on this in video games and things over the years. But I consider myself a game maker, right? So I'm all of the projects that we do at Pencil First Games are games that I'm involved with. Some of which are my designs, some of which are other designs. Sometimes I'm doing heavy development. There's a really broad range of things. But ultimately, for me, it's all about producing, making, and creating this game that then is shared and people get to play. I don't, you mentioned content creator. Videos for me, creating video content is an opportunity to share and contribute to the community, but also an opportunity for me to create stuff that doesn't require anyone else. So when you're making a board game, you have to work with other people. When you're working at a board video game company, you got to work with, deal with other people, even family or whatever. But when I make a video, I mean, I'm working with you right now, but generally speaking, if I'm reviewing a game or doing something about the industry, I just can turn the camera on and do it. And which it's sort of what I imagine somebody who writes a lot might experience. But it's everything else requires me to, and happily, work with other people, right? But it is nice to have a creative outlet that doesn't require that. And I definitely enjoy contributing. But no, I mean, I don't actually view myself as technically, I certainly am a content creator, but I don't aspire to I don't have any video YouTube channel aspirations. I have just opportunities to do things, some fun ideas I've wanted to do, but not anything where that's not my path. My path is just making games.
Yeah, well, making games, participating, highlighting, and giving a platform for, other people. I know that you frequently do reviews for, younger Kickstarter creators, smaller companies as well. Certainly you do reviews on big games, but it seems like you dedicate a lot of your time to putting a highlight on some of these maybe lesser known projects. Is that intentional, or was that an act of convenience, a niche that you saw needed to be filled?
I feel like I get those more. I mean, that's sort of when I said I'm out of favor. I used to get more of the bigger campaigns. Sure. I don't, I think to some degree, so I don't charge, right? And so by not charging, I'm not bound in any way to a preview of one nature or another, right? And I'm not so oftentimes, I mean, I like games, so a lot of my stuff is positive in general, but it's not always positive, and sometimes I can critical of a prototype or a rule book or a gameplay. But I don't know, it's hard to say. Because I guess it comes down to how many prototypes you have, but the process is really easy. You send me an email, and I get all sorts of it, but I say, hey, send me pictures of the game, send me your rules, tell me your timeline. And now I'll often ask, like, is this your first campaign or not? And that's more just to like not get into some bucket where you're like reviewing a game from somebody who hasn't fulfilled like the last 3 games. But and I'll say, send me that information. And then really, if it's a game that I think I'm interested in playing, I'm happy to do it. I enjoy doing the smaller games. It's a really great opportunity to continue to like look at and play like what's new and up and coming. I mean, I just did the Stuck at Home game design contest, and that was like filled with like, early first time design. So I don't mind that stuff, and I enjoy it. But I don't advertise only the little guys, right? Like,
Right.
So I don't know. It does tend to be what I get. Like, I have a preview, which may or may not be on their page. We'll find out, of Flamecraft, which is the new game coming out from Cardboard Alchemy, which like I consider to be like a mega campaign, right? Like it's not Simon, but I think it's gonna be a mega campaign, and it's a great game. I had some critiques also, so we'll see where they land me on the page, but that's probably the biggest one in a while. Like I feel like again, the Kickstarter stuff is pretty small, but my videos, don't have huge like I'm not what's the other word? A trendsetter, not trendsetter, a tastemaker. I'm not a tastemaker in any way whatsoever. So it's always interesting to me.
I think it's really fascinating that you mentioned that you don't accept money, and you really like games. You have criticism of games. That doesn't mean that you're a shill, but you tend to like games. And I find myself in the same position. We do a lot of reviews on this channel, and people tend to misunderstand the relationship that you have to games and to content and to creators and that kind of stuff. I don't charge for doing preview content or anything. I give my genuine opinion on games. But one, I'm in this because I like games, and two, I generally don't agree to do a project on a game that I can already kind of suss out that I'm not going to like it. Like why would I want to accept a project where I'm just going to shit over someone's creativity, right? And then people get suspicious. Oh, like, everything that you do is positive, or like you're just accepting money in order to fluff this game for a Kickstarter or something. People are really suspicious.
It's a hard balance, but I do think but in some ways it's the importance of knowing what's the term I'm looking for, when people are bias, right? So like, for example, here's a great example. At some point, this is what happens. At some point, I got on like Stronghold Games reviewer list. I don't know, like somebody put my name in or whatever, and so they were sending games like they have like Bravo, a bunch of little small dice games, easy to play, right? And like, and that's fun, and I do that content, right? But like, they sent me these 2 games together recently, which is like pretty awesome, right? But they sent me Islands in the Mist and Stronghold Undead. So one, I tend to like not have that many games groups, especially now. It was a lot easier before all the COVID stuff, but like to sit down and like teach a game and play a 60-minute game, like we just tend to do lighter stuff. Let alone 2 of them in the same thing. Like, it's going to be hard enough to get one of these to the table. And then like I like have zero interest in this game. Game might be great, but like I just have nothing about this. Like I look at it and I don't want to be critical, but like, oh, generic undead fantasy, like whatever.
Totally.
I mean, Wildlands was interesting because it was sort of different, but like this is like, I don't know, maybe the game's great, right? I'm not saying the game's that great, but so I wrote them and I'm like, look, I'll probably play this other game. I'm not playing this one, so like, you want me to send it back to you? You want me to give it away? Like, I don't care. But like, so thus, I've already optimize out a title that like I'm pretty sure I'm not going to enjoy play. So that review isn't like, oh, I opened this game, it was generic, it was blah blah blah. Really, the review never happens, right? Because again, I'm not trying to review everything, and really I'm just sharing what I thought about a game I played. And I think better I think publishers are also getting better, even for unpaid stuff, and which I mean I don't want to get into that whole debate, but like but just generally I think like as a publisher, like okay, let's talk about being pencil first games.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know reviewers who over time have enjoyed our games.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, just because they like light, family friendly, like breezy, beautiful games. Like I think everyone should enjoy our games, but not every. But like so like I know pretty sure that if I take this game and I send it off to this person and I send them a copy, which I often do, they're probably going to review it because it's easy to pick up and play, and they're probably going to like it because they like the other things.
Right.
So like, but I don't necessarily just say, oh hey, there's this other war gamer guy who like only does war game stuff. I should send him a copy of Herbaceous because I think I'm going to break the mold with that. I just don't send him a copy. And it's just like, why would I send a game to the war game? Now, sometimes I can remember there was a guy, he was like wargaming.net, but he wanted to play the Siblings Trouble. Mm-hmm. And which is like a game I designed a long time ago. That's a card-driven storytelling game. Anyway, it was like totally not on brand, but he requested it, and I was like, all right, and he liked it, did a good review. But so, I think some of that does. That's why you should just know your reviewer, right? Like find somebody you like and enjoy and are aligned with, and you like that person has my tastes. That's a great person to recommend a game from too, right? Like.
Well, for full transparency, I mean, the point of contact that was made with your company and how I got linked with you is that I reached out for a review copy of Skulk and also said, hey, we have this long-standing interview podcast. I would love to talk to someone over there. But as part of me, a reviewer, requesting a review copy of a game, which happens pretty often. I mean, at this point, we're certainly not a huge channel, but we're definitely not a tiny channel. I do a lot of review requests, and usually if it's the first time that I've ever worked with a publisher, I'm sending them examples of reviews for games in that vein, like something that's in there, and also explaining why I think it would be a good match for the channel, because there are thousands of reviewers out there, and you want it to be something where the publisher is incentivized to have you review it, not just because of the platform and getting views. Of course, that's really important, but you also want the publisher to feel like, well, this isn't someone who's just looking to make a hot take on my game and trash it. I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes, especially in this young hobby, comparatively young hobby, and the kind of informal development of like media and content creation and press and that kind of stuff that has kind of homegrown around it.
Well, and I don't think people often think about the like content isn't created equal, and not all games drive the same attention as all other games. Mm-hmm. And so another part of it is like my channel, my stuff, again, because this is like of the like 6 stack of things I have in my life, this is like one of the lower rungs, or higher, however you want to think about it. But even I don't do any B-roll. I do single takes, first takes. I don't prep notes. I really like, I'm just and even that with a game is going to take me, 2, 3, depending on the game, 2, 3, 4 hours, how many times I'm going to play, 5, 6 hours on the game, then like finding the time to do the video and sitting down. I usually clump them together, but like you're already talking about like a 6 or 8 hour effort, right? And then, and that's like to some degree, doesn't matter what the game, like the cost of, unless it's like a super small game, the cost to create the content is the same. I have to play it. I have to like get opinions. I have to think about it, and then I have to do the video and put it together. And mine is like as low as it gets, pretty much, other than like, hey, I bought this game. Here's what the box looks like. And unboxing is a lot easier. But anyway, my point is, and then you release it. And like, again, I don't particularly like get caught up on like, this is a 13 view video versus a 100 or 300 view video or 1,000 view video. That's about where I cap out, by the way. But like for sure, if I go out of my way to get a game that just came out that's a big release and I do it, versus like some random like, so where is it? I don't know where it is. I backed a Kickstarter for a game called Familiar Alchemy. It was like a small Kickstarter. Something about it caught my eye. But no one, that video is going to have 30, 40, 50 views total forever, right? Because it's a game. No, I don't want to be offensive to the game, but it's just not a game that is not a big splash, big market game. It's like a niche thing, and so like that content on your channel is actually. It's not growth content. It's at best filler, but at worst actually blocking you from doing better content that's going to grow your channel differently.
Totally.
So like how you think about your content in your channel is pretty significant, and just releasing stuff to release stuff isn't a big deal. And if you release stuff that's different, there's no rhyme or reason to my content really. You start getting it, but there's like, this company, Stronghold Games, sends me stuff. So I review Stronghold Games stuff because they're sending me stuff. Or there's a game I purchase, I picked, and I play like Calico. AEG doesn't send me their stuff, but I went and bought Calico, right?
Totally.
And then there's this weird little preview for like smaller Kickstarters or whatever. If you're a viewer, you're like, oh, Ed is always going to show me this, and this. You don't have that, right? So my channel doesn't have a really strong through line like you would want if you were intending to grow and build your audience, right? And so that's also part of this whole bias isn't the right word, but it's sort of like selection bias, right? It's like why you're picking things that you think will be popular, be responsive, things that you enjoy, all of which turns into generally a lot of positive feedback when you review things, unless you're like your channel's all about games you don't like.
Well, you're Eduardo, I'm Eddie. So we can have like a joint channel, Ed and Ed Trash Games, and we're going to start going in the opposite direction. We're going to request or seek out only the games that we don't like, and we're going to just talk smack. That sounds like a project.
I would do that, except the way I would want to do it would just be to talk smack about games without playing them, like explicitly.
Yeah, there we go. I love it.
We're not going to actually play this game. There's no basis to it other than what it looks like, what it feels like. Look at the rules on page 14. Like, who is going to read this? I didn't read it. But when it comes to like, I don't have time to play things I don't want to play. But that's why I appreciate channels like the Dice Tower, because of they have a reasonable commitment to get through a large body of work. Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't necessarily do that.
So let's talk about the higher rung or the lower rung, depending on what perspective we were going back to in that metaphor. So what was the original genesis, the moment in which you were like, I want to make games? I don't care if it was video games or board games.
Sure.
The original inspiration that got you into making things for other people to play.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I actually know the answer to it because it was a large impact on my life. So I certainly grew up playing games. I loved I was a big Nintendo kid, but also over time I was the kid that had all the different consoles and was importing games from Japan, and I played a lot of console games.
You got your Mario 3 in the background.
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, I got lots of stuff, but again, all in on games. But actually, growing up. Didn't really occur to me that you could be making games. I mean, obviously people do make games, but it just wasn't like, I didn't say like I'm going to grow up and I'm going to make games. It was like I really enjoyed consuming games. Mm-hmm. And then I went to the University of Michigan, and heading in there, I was sort of like, oh hey, like they send you this thing. It was like the Synergy Guide, and it's like all the things on campus. And I got there and I was like, oh, there must be a video game thing. And looking around, there was just the Dr. Mario Club. And the Dr. Mario Club was people who got together and played Dr. Mario, which I thought was hilarious, but not of interest to me. And so I was in college, my freshman year, and I was in some class talking to whoever my friends were at the time. And, Mike, this was talking to Mike, but I was like, lamenting the not-existent video game thing. Not board games, but video games. And he's like, you can just, he was very like, well, you just need five signatures. You can start a club. Like, why are you complaining that there's no club when they make it super easy for you to make a club? And I was like, touche. So I went, got 5 SIGs, and I started a company, a club organization called Wolverine Soft. And at the time, it was like for the development, research, and playing of games. And out of the bat, we weren't really making it so much as like playing it and setting up tournaments. But then over time we started trying to make games, and by my senior year I did lead a game called Crisis Wolverine Insurrection Green, which was all about the University of Michigan versus Michigan State trying to take it over. And it was like an RPG, but where the different character classes were like, jock, druggy, like stereotype character classes, like Black Mage and all that. And then what we did was we used RPG Maker, but took photos of campus. It's pretty cool. Like today, it's still pretty cool. But anyway, so that got me into sort of more proactively making games. And it's actually quite a source of pride that Wolverine Soft still exists today at the University of Michigan making games, which is super.
That's so cool.
Yeah. But so from there, I was also studying Japanese because I wanted to be able to buy a game from Japan and play it without having to struggle my way through it. And then I got into the JET program, which is a like teach English in Japan program. Mm-hmm. But my friend, somebody who was like a roommate, but he wasn't a roommate, but he was like in our place constantly, was like, why are you going to go to Japan? Why don't we start a video game company instead? And I was like, well, we don't even have a game idea, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, I was like, okay, I have to tell them my answer in like 6 days. So you have 6 days to convince me to not take this opportunity. Because like JET's actually, it's more than just like it's got a stipend, it's a pay job. It was like the beginning of I don't know about a career path, but it was like something after college.
It was a big deal. It's something you can rely on.
Yeah, which otherwise I didn't have because I didn't have a major other than Japanese. So I did anyway. So what ends up happening is it takes him about an hour to convince me. We start making a Game Boy Advance game because he had a game there's such a hopeless path. Like today, you just make a mobile game and release it to market and see what happens. But this was just but started Theorysoft and making this game, Dark Alloy, for those history buffs out there, all of which went nowhere. It sort of had to close it out, which was like an interesting and important step for me. And then ultimately I went into QA for Atari. I was able to get that job and went QA to design to production and running studios and things like that. So, but it all sort of started there for sure.
And then at some point you transition from making video games into board games. And I saw, looking through your history, your first board game design, at least that I could find on BGG, that was successfully published, wasn't published through Pencil First Games, and then shortly after Pencil First comes into the picture. So what's the story there?
Well, one part of that story, so you're talking about Murder of Crows, and Murder of Crows, the part of that story is that game was in development for 7 years, which isn't really clear there. But so what happens is Atari, then I work at a company called Mind Control Software. At Mind Control Software, I move up the ladder and I become the studio head there. And at the time, the art director at Mind Control Software was a guy by the name of Thomas Denmark. Thomas Denmark is a fabulous artist, but also created Dungeoneer, which is a really it's a little dated now, but it was a very successful card adventure game, like sort of dungeon crawl card game. And he was working with Atlas Games, who's the publisher, and he was working on a game called Murder of Crows, which he was struggling with, and essentially asked me if I wanted to, design it with him, co-design it. And I said, sure. I mean, whatever. A little weird. I think we were still working together, but it was like a card game, right? And so we started working on it. I helped with sort of giving a structure to the wordplay that's in that game. And then we had the game together, and he just had to do 60 pieces of art, which would subsequently take him 7 years to do. But he did eventually finish it. And I Murder of Crows is a great game. I should have just for those curious what it is. This was the first edition of Murder of Crows. This is a small game, right? First edition of Murder of Crows, and then they made it
7 years of development for that tiny package.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he wasn't getting paid until afterwards, right? But they've since done a second tin, and I still get royalties on Murder. I still get $100 a quarter on Murder of Crows.
Hey, that ain't nothing.
Yeah. Okay, but so that was happening, and then so basically we did that, and then totally stopped because it was just waiting on him to do art, and my job was once a month to be like, hey, did he finish anything? And he'd be like, here's one new character, and all right. So it was 7 years of me prodding for but I ended up working at a number technology and gaming, and then I was working at a company called Blue Fang Games, maker of the Zoo Tycoon series. Which, another long story, but after a long thing, we were working with another company that went bankrupt that stiffed us $500,000, and the company went under, unfortunately. And at the time, we had a lot of online games. We had Zoo Kingdom, Oregon Trail, and Carmen Sandiego, amongst other things, and they all like effectively get shut down, right? And it was, over time, as you make video games, as it's moved to these mobile online server-based live games, they disappear, right? Like they're unplayable. And actually, once you leave console, you can't. If you made a mobile game 5 years ago, you can't play it on any device. You can't launch it. You can't load it. You can't
totally
access it. So you create these things that completely disappear. Not in people's memories, but are become unplayable again. And at the time, I just was really the appeal of the idea of making a board game that could, be published or not. But like if you make a prototype, you make this game, you have it on your shelf. It can be there. It doesn't require technology to run, so to speak. Was something that I was excited about, because like I had just had to lay off 50 people, and I'm literally going through and like closing a company, and with not and the result of which is a bunch of memories, right? but like things that are no longer, that just get shut off, right? And so started a Liftoff, and actually at that time submitted to Liftoff to publishers. It wasn't Kickstarters. Queen Games was looking at it for a long time, but I had made like 3 prototypes. They had one for a year, and then then they said no, and then like it took another year to get it back. But so it was sort of on hiatus, and so I then get a job at a company called Snapstick, which got acquired. But then I was working at Disney, and in mobile games and online games. And 2 things happened at the same time, roughly around whatever period, 2011, 12, 13, something like that. Is one, finally Thomas finishes the Murder of Crows art. Finally, he gets it to Atlas Games, and then they publish Murder of Crows. So that sort of happens. And then 2, and that happened before Liftoff. And then 2, guy by the name of Aldo Giozzi, me butchering the last name. He runs Impressions, which has now been acquired by Flat River, but he's like very in the board game space, and he's basically a consolidator. But I meet him through Thomas at like Pacificons and things like that. And then there's a gaming group with Richard Bliss in like his garage. And, we're like there playing and having game night till Fristo's there. And Emily was like, you should bring Liftoff, because I have this thing that I can just pull off a shelf and bring with me, and it will just work wherever I take it. It doesn't require a device. It doesn't require. And so, and I'm not a huge fan of like, not a fan. But like if I'm not testing something, if I don't have a reason, I don't for the games that I've printed, unless like Emily asked me to bring it, I don't like go to a table and be like, hey, let's play this game. That's the game I made. Like, it seems weird to me. But anyway, so I brought it, and we had a really nice handcrafted wood carving masonite board game for Liftoff. Like, I still have the 2 originals. They're like fantastically sturdy. And we played it, and people had a good time. And Aldo's like, why aren't you doing a Kickstarter? And I was like, what's Kickstarter? Or isn't Kickstarter just umbrellas or like whatever? And so Tia was like, yeah, I just did one for whatever thing I just did. And then, yeah, we did the Kickstarter. Went from there.
How much of a through line do you see from like your childhood days of being the kid who has all the consoles and plays all the games and has a fascination with Japanese-made video games, presumably American-made as well, but, at your heart, you were the kid who wanted to be able to import games and everything, to the kind of core aesthetic and identity of the games that you're putting out with Pencil First now. I mean, I know that when Skulk Hollow first came across my computer and I saw it, even without knowing the mechanics of the game, like something about it felt like, there's hints of colors and schemes of Mystical Ninja and Chrono Trigger in here. It felt like this was a Super Nintendo game come to life.
Sure.
In a board game form. And is that like a conscious thing?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question. I think so as a kid, I played lots of games, for sure, and I consumed games as fast as I could keep them and acquire them. And one of the interesting things about me, which I didn't go into, is I started all these businesses to make money as a kid. Like I had a house cleaning business, I had a catering business, I did yard work, like shoveling in the snow. I'm from New York originally, and so like I was generating as much money as possible for the sole purpose of buying video games. And so
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So and I was a completionist in that regard. And so I was playing everything, and there really wasn't a bar in terms of like not play. I mean, I'm sure there was a couple, but like generally, like if it came out, I'd play it if I could. And I was also really big into Magic. We were talking about the two cards behind you. So like for sure there's a love of games, but actually like if you were to like if I went through and I described to you all the dream games I wanted to make when I was a kid that like drove me, most of them are going to align more like to what I just described as something I have zero interest in anymore, which is like I don't know. I don't know if it's a fair. I'm trying to think of a way to describe it, but like just like standard, you know.
You wanted to make Hexen.
Yeah, like just like violent or like power fantasy, adventure fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a game, you know, like whether it was Zelda or Metroid or Doom or like any of those games, right? It was all like that.
Sure.
That a game that you'd be like, this game would be awesome. Like not this game would be fun, this game would be pretty, but like this game is awesome. And then at Atari, I guess Atari was an interesting job because Atari QA was not unique, but like it's a publishing like monster. It was actually GT Interactive acquired, Atari. So we had all the Atari games that we tested there. We had so everything from Driver was in that loop to Unreal Tournament. I QA'd on site at Epic for Unreal Tournament. We had Pirates of the Caribbean, Sid Meier's Pirates. So I worked on site at Firaxis. Not as anyone important, but like there. And so
sure.
I played the Dora the Explorer game, Trivial Pursuit, nonstop. I mean, like, so the range of product that was like even beyond what like my normal range would be like, and it's just so much game content. And I think at some point you dive into like what's fun. I'm trying to like, I know when I sort of gravitated towards visceral fun in games and just enjoying it, and Mind Control Software was about iteration and finding the fun and just creating fun dynamics and aesthetics in games. But I'm trying to think of like when I at some point, maybe it was Blue Fang Games moving into Disney, where like right now I work for Apple Oven Machine Zone, and I worked on Game of War and Mobile Strike, which are like not games that like out of the cuff I'd be like, yeah, I want to play a military 4X, world map control game, right? Like it's just not where I would normally do it. So some of that challenge is like really understanding the players and the audience. But I think like I've moved towards I don't mind. I like color, I like fun. I think it's Nintendo. I think if anything, I would say the strongest influence for me from a game perspective at a young age was everything Nintendo. So I think that's probably, if anything, set the bar on like things can be cool like Metroid, be adventure-y like Zelda, but also like colorful like Mario, and like but like I love Shadow of the Colossus, right?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, you managed to do all that, but also you still have that kind of badass type of game, just awesome, something that's like, the visceral feeling of Quake, except translated via, Mario or something like that vibrance and color.
But that's a great example of tension and losing tension in that, like, so the artist on Skulk Hall is Dustin Faust. Met Dustin at Disney. Fantastic artist, and like, there's a really heavy Secret of Nim, like Nim, sort of classic Disney look to it. And Keith Mateka, who designed so Skulk is its own little story. I started with an idea, and then Keith made it into a proper game. But you know, he is the whole role player franchise on his side,
Yeah.
and role player, you know, is much more true fantasy art and look and illustrations, right? And basically Keith was like, why are we making this cartoony at all? Like, this should be like, Shadow of the Colossus is not a cartoony game, right? And like, this will just be better with, like, this should just be illustration and like, and ultimately, I frankly believe from a market perspective, he's actually right. Like, that game, if actually given that kind of treatment, would have been a bigger game, if that was the objective, which it wasn't exactly. But like, for me, I wanted to work with Dustin. I love his style. I love that kind of character. And so the win though was Keith kept, because like I could try to find it, but like I would say early on, the monsters, the Guardians, were more Disney. Like, there are versions of them that look like bigger animals, but from more like the Fox in space, so they're not as gritty. And Keith was just he just kept crapping all over it, and like, it was an interesting thing because he wasn't interacting directly with Dustin, so it was like a little bit of a, but like, he just kept saying like, I don't think this is cool enough, and he helped pull it so that like Grak and these Guardians, they're dangerous looking, they're mean looking, and I think it really helped the title overall, which some people feel is kiddie or cartoony, but would have even been more so with had it been where we were originally. So I do think he helped us get to this great mixture of like scary and cute.
It's like a Miyazaki movie or something, you know, like you watch Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke, you got a lot of cute in there, but then you also have some terrifying imagery in it as well. Still cohesive within that aesthetic.
Yeah.
The idea of making a completely different art style to me would be like someone saying, yo, you know, this Avatar The Last Airbender cartoon sounds cool, but what if we made it kind of grim dark? And it would have just taken away all of the charm, but also I think it would have maybe destroyed the beautiful contrast that has. So maybe you're right. Maybe that would have been a bigger seller.
For those who like, for those who it lands well with, I appreciate. Yeah, I mean, like, there are people who think we should have done minis, right? And I don't think of minis as a board game. I still think of minis as a war game, and that's not true anymore. But like, that was just sort of where I was, right? So
one thing that I definitely want to hit on when I look at your catalog of games as a designer, because we've talked quite a bit about like the development of your company, but compared to a lot of designers, I see a lot of collaborative work, co-designs.
Sure.
And you even brought up at the very beginning of this interview that board games is something where you have to work with a multitude of people. And yeah, that's true, even for people who have singular designs, you know, like, let's say Jamie Stegmaier designs Tapestry, but at the same time, he's still working with Andrew Bosley on the artwork. He's working
Sure.
with the Automa Factory, that kind of stuff. But he's still the sole designer. Why do you think you gravitate to so many collaborative projects?
Well, I enjoy working with people, but more than that, I think, okay, board game is a weird hobby space in some regards where things are smaller, right? But like making a video game, right? So I'm a generalist, and as a generalist, I have 20,000, 50,000, some absurd amount of hours getting to be really good. So actually, as a generalist, like, there are categories that I'm better than junior specialists at, but like, I'm a generalist. And so everything I've ever made, maybe except for some videos, but everything I've ever made is me working with specialists who, like, by definition are better than me. Like, I don't sit here and be like, that back end engineer, or that, that client, this guy, or that 3D modeler. I could do that 3D. I could do, like, or this, we're making a game where we're gonna, be writing Disney dialogue. Like, I could do a better aerial than somebody who specializes in aerial dialogue or whatever. Like, they're like, this idea that you're better than anyone else at any given thing, I think is like, for me, everyone's better than me at everything, because anyone who specializes in any certain thing is just going to be better at it. And that, you know, there may be areas where that isn't always true, but the heart of it is, because I'm pretty aware of what I'm good at and what people are better at than me, I gravitate, like, to me, that's why I'm a game maker, right? Because or a product lead or whatever. But like, for me, it's not, it's I want to make this. And to make this, Skulk is a great example. I knew I wanted a one versus many, big Guardian, small. I wanted to have lots of units going on there, but I wanted to be simple. But I wanted to have a confrontations 3x3 grid board. I wanted that to be small, and I wanted it head to head, 2 players only, and I wanted there to be a Guardian thing, and I wanted to take units from here and start climbing on it. Like, that dynamic and aesthetic was like crystal clear, and I could find it somewhere. But I have I did all the original non-mechanical vision design, right?
Sure.
But then I also wanted to be fun. Like, I also wanted to like stand up to thousands of plays, and I'm not as a good enough designer to do that. And so then I go looking for people. Herbaceous is another great example. I saw she had reskinned Bonanza, and she made this incredible herb art, which was just a reskin on BGG, and she posted on Facebook, and I asked if that a game existed, and she said, well, it's a reskin of something. And I was like, somebody needs to like make this gorgeous herb game that's going to appeal to like elders, to like grandparents to play, and it should just be a beautiful solitaire game. And so I was like, I'm going to make a beautiful solitaire. Beth's interested, and I'm like struggling with it. And I even was reading like solitaire books, and it just wasn't, I wasn't landing. And I had known Steve for a variety of reasons, but I asked him about it, and Steve was like, Steve Finn now, different designer. Steve Finn was like, well, I don't really do solo that much, though he has since done more solo. I don't do solo that much, so but I could do a 2 to 4 player game. And he sent me, I was like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'm not getting anywhere, so like I'm going to give up a little bit, but let's see what you do. And he sent me Herbaceous, which what he sent me like 2 weeks later is like 2 design choices, 2 numbers away from what was shipped. And it's a fabulous game, and it's just wonderful. And then actually the interesting thing, there's like, I was telling this exact story to Keith Mateka. This is before Skulk Hollow. First, I met this guy. He was showing off some like role player at Gen Con. And he's like, you know, I like solo games. I've done some solo designs. Maybe I could take a stab at it. And I was like, sure. And so he did solo for Herbaceous. And I love his solo. But his solo is a play on Biblios, which is what Steve Finn did, which Herbaceous is like Biblios dice. So Keith did an homage to Biblios, which he loved, on Herbaceous. Anyway, so that, long story short, I enjoy the manifestation of working on a game where it's about the journey with the people you are making it, and it's about what you're trying to do, and it's about having a clear vision about what you want to do, but also being flexible to iterate and be like, this is a dead end, but there's all these other great things. Right now, I'm working on a Hanafuda deck with Vincent Dutrait, which is, you know, gonna be, it's like an art project. It's like, there's no avenue for this to be successful, because if we want to do so Hanafuda deck is what Nintendo used to make. This
totally
is
way back in the day,
right? And it's a special type of card. You can ask Nintendo or factories in Japan to make you a deck of this card, which will cost you $10 to $14 a deck, like crazy. And we looked for cheaper ways of doing it, which we have, and still that's what these white ones are. Is like figuring out a way we can deliver it, but it's still going to be like $5 for something that's literally like that is this big, right? The manufacturing cost on something like this is like the equivalent to like a mid-sized game, like a $40 game, or depends on the game, I guess. But anyway, but Vincent and I are having a good time doing it, and apparently it's Bruno Cathala's like favorite game, and Vincent and Bruno have worked together.
That's perfect.
So Bruno has looked at our stuff. And so I'm, like getting into these discussions with Vincent where he's like, well, when Bruno plays, he plays with this rule. Cause this is like this ancient game with all these rule sets. And I'm like, yeah, but like this is sort of based on the Nintendo one, and the Nintendo rule set has this. And like I'm sort of like having this sort of pseudo debate with like I don't want to overstate it, but like this like slightly back and forth with like top 1 to 5 best designer of all time, like whatever in your list, and so it making stuff leads you into all sorts of fun and unexpected places, right? And that if you did everything by yourself, you would still be doing everything by yourself.
Well, I think the hallmark of great leadership is to be able to have that vision and then find people who can make that vision come true and then empower them to do it, and listening to them and their expertise as they work alongside it. And as such, that is really the hallmark and through line of you as a game creator. When you identify yourself, you are Ed, the game creator. And this has been such a great opportunity to talk to you. It's a real honor to finally meet you. We've hovered in a lot of the same circles. I've been watching your videos for ages, and it was a delight to learn more about your background, your history, and the continued role that you have within board games. Where can people go to find out more about the projects you're working on?
Sure. And thank you for all the kind words. Pencilfirstgames.com is got all of our stuff. You can look at the games, you can buy games, you can see digital versions. We have a promotion going on now for Herbaceous Pocket Edition, which is another fun little game. It's a small version of Herbaceous, which we were talking about. And then like I'm at eBaraf. We have the Pencil First Games community page, which you on Facebook. But I'm pretty easy to find and reach out to. Depending on the avenue you come in, you might meet Jessica as well, which I think is who you met the first time. But Jessica's awesome. But yeah, no, this was a fun chat. Hopefully, I didn't think we were going to be going quite so far back into the Edo history, but hopefully it was interesting for folks.
It was interesting to me, and I think if we are interested in the conversation, then the people who like what we do in these interviews are going to get the most out of it. There are other spaces. You can go to Board Game Design Lab or Breaking Into Board Games if you want the nitty gritty, or, tell me about the new mechanics that are going to be in Maul Peak, and I want to know the individual things about it.
Which is going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I mean, a standalone sequel, I guess let's leave it with a nugget here. Are you going to find a way of incorporating solo into the system that you established with Skulk Hollow? Because I know that people love solo games now more than ever, and I've even seen some fan attempts in order to create automas for Skulk Hollow.
This is a great question, and maybe not the best one to end on, but the answer to this is Maul Peak is a standalone game that's going to be roughly the same weight as Maul Peak or Skulk Hollow. The super cool thing out of the gate is that it's all interchangeable. So you can take the Foxens versus the new Guardians, the Bears versus the old Guardians, and it just blows up the amount of options. We also were able to create a really great 3 to 4 player experience where you're doubling up 2 Guardians versus both sides. On the solo side, we actually spent a lot of time working on it and working through it, and like to some degree, the Automa experience didn't feel good. We tried a bunch, and maybe somebody can make their own, but like it just never Skulk Hollow is a swingy game. There is a little, it isn't without its luck side of it, and like it wasn't landing, it wasn't feeling good. So we ended up then trying to make a solo-only Guardian, but suddenly we were like, well, if this Guardian's cool, shouldn't it be just a Guardian? And then, so there's 2 things. One, when we have the Maul Peak Kickstarter, which we're trying to figure out, we've created a solo adventure that spans between the original game and the new game that gives you playable units for the game. So it's a cool solo experience for solo gamers and anyone else. It's not competing in Maul Peak as, playing the Guardians. It's not like a solo Automa. And And then we also have taken all those other ideas and we have them in a bucket for sort of like what would be a proper solo experience. But we look at that as it's more like how do you take these mechanics and things and create more of I think of it more of like a dungeon or a gauntlet style, like where it's more about what a great solo experience would be. I have no interest in adding a not good solo experience.
Right. And I think yet again, this speaks to you, your integrity, the desire to have vision is like, why shoehorn in something that's, subpar. I won't say garbage, but subpar, when it maybe compromises what you really wanted most out of the game in the first place. You want to deliver that. And I actually really applaud that. You could maybe sell some more units if you just shoehorned in something that, maybe it's not great, but whatever. People could figure it out.
And if somebody does figure it out, that's great. Somebody made a Legendary Creatures is an older game of ours, but somebody created a solo version of it, and solo rule set, and then we brought in Christopher Ham, the original designer, to like work with them, and we now have a really nice solo version. And it's so nice, in fact, that it's not out yet because I said, hey, got to finish the Maul stuff up, but let's get the original. Let's get Sebastian, the graphic designer. Like, I don't want let's make a nice PDF that's like here, like that, like a really good, not just like a BGG post, but like let's make something that people can download and feel like this is sanctioned, right? Like, because anyone can do anything. I'm all for it, but this is like this. We all think this is good. Like, I've played it. Like, this is good. Like, let's definitely promote it, and pay the guy some. And so that's in development. But I mean, I think but I guess all I'm saying is I applaud people for trying and having fun and creating things other people can enjoy. Like, take the bits and make it happen. It has to hit a certain level that we're happy with it for it to become canon, if you will.
It has been such a pleasure speaking with you, Ed. I look forward to a chance to talk again. I'm looking forward to seeing that Kickstarter for Maul Peak. You can find all kinds of games related to Ed at the links that'll be in the podcast description, video description, all of that. Once again, thanks for coming on to the show, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website, cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.